This is the third generation American Standard Pressure Assisted Cadet toilet. A toilet that's been around since at least circa 2008. Sometime around 2009, these slowly started replacing the second generation Pressure Assisted Cadet. The second gen has been known for being absolutely awful. But how is this compared to it? I'm going to go ahead and give some spoilers. Now, it's better, but it's still got some crappy qualities about it. But let's talk about it. For starters, you can easily tell this is based on the newer style of Madeira toilet that American Standard makes now. In fact, the bowl isn't much different. The trackway passage is already the same. The trackway opening is also the same. But now it sports a Cadet 3-like tank instead of the older 1.6 Cadet tank like the second gen did. It's a very basic design, but it doesn't look terrible, honestly. Though I do like the styles of the older ones better. So, older ones from the late 2000s up until the early 2010s obviously used to have the Salon Flushmate 503, which, by the way, has been recalled. Sometime around 2014, most if not all of them started going more for the Eco Flush, which isn't entirely exclusive to this, but it's most known to use this exact flushmate after 2013. How much better is it? Well, it isn't much better. A common flaw with most of these flushmates is the fact that they have some weird, how do you say it, squirting action at the end. And you'll see it when we flush this toilet. Also, I've noticed another flaw is that you can't flush it while it's refilling. You have to wait a few seconds after it's refilled to flush it again. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but it's kind of annoying. Now let's take a look at a flush. As you can tell, the flush is very unimpressive. And as you notice at the end there, some of the rim jets started going a little crazy at the end. The main issue with this model really isn't the fact that it performs badly or has a bad pull. It actually seems to be slightly better than the flushometer variant, which is kind of weird to think about. But the main problem with this is the quality control. It's sometimes very inconsistent, and as you saw there with the rim jets, they kind of go all over the place, and that's different per PA Cadet for this generation. You also want to mention that the ball rims. It's pretty all over the place. Sometimes these don't even get ball rims, and I've seen it before, and it's not a great look. And that is the third generation PA Cadet. It's a little bit better than the second generation, but it still has some crappy qualities about it that I do not really care for. I definitely think in terms of performance and stuff like that, it's slightly better than its flushometer variant Madeira, but not by that much. But let's see how it goes in the grading scale. Let's grade it. Starting with the overall design of the third generation Pressure Assisted Cadet, it does have a nice look to it, even though it's a little bit more on the basic side. It definitely stands out a little bit more compared to some other pressure-assisted toilets, though, personally, I think the previous two generations looked a little bit more interesting. With the first generation looking a little bit more interesting, and the second generation looking nicer overall. I'd still give it a 6, though. The flushmates are divided up by two different flushmates, one of them being a 503, and the other one being an Eco Flush. I shouldn't need to go over the fact again that most of the 503s have been recalled, but I'm kind of interested how the Eco Flush will age. Right now it has some very strange quirks and problems that I don't see working out too good in the future, but we'll just have to wait and see. With the fact that one of them has been recalled and the other one has some strange quirks about it that isn't great, I'd settle on a 3 for Flushmate. You shouldn't be surprised the quality control is also crap. I mean, to be fair, it really wasn't good to begin with, but It just hasn't been getting better. I mean, the previous generation was just as bad as this, and this unfortunately is no exception. It's not really the fact that it struggles a lot, although that can happen sometimes. But it's the fact that the rim jets, again, just sometimes don't work, often leading up to no ball rinse. This is a very common problem, by the way, with most modern toilets, and this is no exception. With that fact in the way, the quality control also gets free. The trapway is fine enough, I guess. It's definitely pretty large, and it looks like it's perfectly fine. I still think the opening is a little bit questionable sometimes, but I give it a 5. Yeah, don't be surprised. Just like the 2 prior generations, the flush is crap. I don't think I really need to explain it, just look at it. It gets it free. The pull is perfectly fine enough, although I feel like sometimes this thing might struggle occasionally. Thankfully not as common as you might think, but still something to look out afterwards. It definitely pulls things in better than the previous generation. I mean, my goodness, the previous generation just absolutely sucked in general, but that was probably the worst part. It's definitely improved here, but just a little bit though. I give it a 5. Here's the weird thing. While the Madeira version doesn't really perform that great, I definitely know the performance is a little bit more consistent with this than the Madeira version, which is weird. Usually it's the polar opposite, especially with the prior 2 generations with the 1.6 Madeira. The 1.6 Madeira performed a lot better than both of those, especially the 2nd generation PA Cadet. But here it's kind of flipped, where the Madeira doesn't perform as well. Meanwhile, the PA Cadet performs a little bit better. I'd still say it isn't perfect though, and I'll give it a 5 at most. Out of all the PA Cadets made, this easily has the worst ball rinse. Not only do you have a chance of not having any ball rinse at all because of the crappy quality control, but it just isn't good in general. I mean, considering the bowl is a little bit more deeper compared to the prior 2 generations, there'll probably be a lot more stains left behind, especially with how crappy the flush is. It barely will cover anything at all. And because of that, the ball rinse gets a 2. With the mixed bag flush mates as well as the crappy quality control, I don't really see too many of them lasting too long. But at the same time, it's definitely a lot better than the prior generation, though it's not really a high bar to set. Because of all the stuff I just mentioned, I think this gets a 4. Now let's talk about the overall value of this toilet. I'm going to be real here, there really isn't much to get out of this toilet. It's still pretty crappy at the end of the day, but at the same time, it's a bit of an improvement over the prior generation from the 2000s. Again, that's not really a high bar to set. Unfortunately, this thing is still riddled with problems with an even worse flush and even worse ball rinse compared to the prior generation. There really isn't much to praise here besides the performance being a little bit better and the pull being also a little bit better. But again, is that really an improvement? Because honestly, it still seems like a downside that it still really isn't greatly improved. Though I will take these over the previous generation any day, it still isn't a great product after all. And honestly, it isn't worth buying these at all either, as they still make this generation to this day. At the end of the day, this thing suffers from a lot of quality disadvantages as well as some better or worse quality compared to the prior generation, which was just an absolute disaster. But still, that really isn't a good look for a toilet like this. So I'd have to give a value of 3. And the final score of the 3rd generation American Standard Pressure Sister Cadet from the modern era is a 39 out of 100. Compared to the previous generation, this thing is a slight improvement, but that really isn't a high bar to set, as I've repeated multiple times now. This thing still suffers from a crappy flush and ball rinse, with some slight improvements in terms of the pull and performance. That's it. I mean, to be completely fair, the Pressure Sister Cadets have never been good in general. Most of them have aged poorly, especially the prior generation, and unfortunately this is no different either.